And now, all the way from America, it's time for the Tea Party Power Hour with everyone's favourite Yank, Mark Gillar.
Welcome to the Tea Party Power Hour. I am Mark Gillar. I'm your host. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Ryan Walters from Oklahoma. He is the Oklahoma State Superintendent. He has also served as the state's education secretary. He's been the CEO of Every Kid Counts Oklahoma, and he spent 8 years as a high school history teacher. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me on, Mark. I really appreciate it.
Now, I understand that last week you went to Stillwater to give a speech at a Turning Point USA event, and some of the people who showed up were, shall we say, less than friendly, less than hospitable.
Yes, sir. So it's been interesting to see it firsthand. I've seen a lot around college campuses around the country. And here in Oklahoma, we're a very red state. As a matter of fact, I think we're the reddest state. All 77 counties voted for Donald Trump twice. We're the only state in the country that did that.
Wow.
And so I've been planning a tour to different college campuses. And about 10 days out, we start seeing that there is a mobilization of protesters. And Mark, we get a script sent to us that's being sent to all the protesters that says, hey, white people barricade in front of the people of color at the protest because the cops will go after them. Visibly shield the visibly gay individuals in the crowd, wear masks, shout him down, don't let him speak. So we're going into it going, well, I guess there's going to be a little bit of a rowdy protest. Well, when we get there, of course, there's about 100 protesters that just scream obscenities and shout the entire speech to try to make sure that a conservative viewpoint can't be held and can't be heard. And isn't that incredible in a state as red as Oklahoma? Did you even see that type of mentality on a college campus?
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. I'm about 3.5 miles from Texas A&M University right now, and I remember driving one day at the corner of University and Texas Avenues, and they were, when I say they, the same crowd you're talking about was out on the corner of Texas A&M University at that intersection, protesting on behalf of BLM. And again, Texas A&M, I graduated there in 1986, and I got to tell you, it was a lot more conservative place back then. But even in strong bastions of conservatism, like Oklahoma, like Texas, we're seeing things like this happen. And I think, Ryan, the thing that I get asked the most, and I have a feeling this might be true for you too, given your position, is how did this happen? How did we get to the point where education from kindergarten through grad school has become so liberal? How do you think we got where we are now?
Yes, sir, Mark. I do think that is the great question here. The way that this has happened is if you go back to the 1960s, you began to see college radicals taking over the college campus. You remember the protests, but remember the college professors that started joining in on some of that, started promoting some of that. Well, then all those protesters go on and they become the professors. So they are kind of pushed along by professors. Then you see them taken over. And so what we've seen is higher ed has been completely taken over by radical leftists from that 1960s, 1970s kind of cultural movement. So then what happens next, right? So they take over higher ed. They control, if you go down the halls, like I said, I've been down the halls of some of our universities, and it is, I think they're, much to the left of a Bernie Sanders. We're talking the most left-wing type of professors. Well, then you funnel so much of your society through higher ed, right? Higher ed has this powerful lobby. So, in our state, we broke the chains around this, but hey, they try to make every teacher go through a college of education. They try to require college degrees on as many jobs as they can. Well, guess what? Well, when you funnel more than half of your population through an indoctrination mill, well, what do you think is going to happen? Well, you turn out a society that has moved further and further to the left, a breakdown of traditional values that were very common sense just 20 years ago. And then lastly, I do a lot of work, obviously, in the K-12 system is where my focus is. And when you send all your teachers to a college that is a far left-wing, dripping in Marxism institution, well, your teachers come out much further to the left also, and then it begins to be this self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, I mean, Mark, if you're a conservative, traditional-minded individual, do you really want to go spend 4 or 5 years in higher ed, $120,000 into higher? No, I mean, so what ends up happening is you end up just self-selecting more left-wing people to go into education, which then, of course, indoctrinates our kids. So it begins to be this vicious cycle that's played out over the last 4 decades.
Well, yeah, and these kids have been hit with this since kindergarten, and a lot of this is just common sense. I think it's just common sense that you don't put a drag queen in a kindergarten classroom. I think it's just common sense that you don't have a local library event aimed at kids called Drag Time Story Hour. I think it's just common sense that you don't let a male and we'll get to Title IX in a minute, but you don't let a male who identifies as a female go in female bathrooms, go in female locker rooms, or compete against females in various sports competitions. I mean, that's just common sense. And we live in a world right now where up is down, down is up, good is evil, evil is good. And it's a situation where I don't think even 10 years ago we could have imagined we were going to be this far along the liberal continuum. But let me ask you this: you were there in Stillwater. You showed up. Did anybody try to engage you in a civil way, or was it just all screaming, hollering, shouting you down?
No one from the left tried to engage whatsoever. It was screaming for me to die, for me to kill myself, obscenities, calling me a murderer. I mean, it was just. And trying to shout in unison, trying to, every time I'd open my mouth, scream, trying to shout down the fellow students who did have genuine questions. There were probably about 150, 200 conservative students there genuinely trying to listen and engage in a conversation. Then I'd say there were about 100 protesters that just tried to shout them down as well. There were multiple times a college student tried to plead with them of can't we just have a back and forth, where we can listen and then ask questions and listen and ask questions. And they just shouted down those college students as well. So that there was not much of an engagement from anyone on the left there, even when their own fellow students tried to say, hey, this is a great opportunity. Why don't we have a discussion here?
I saw a clip from a local news station that covered it. I'll be honest, I thought it was more than a little slanted. They were trying to be as negative about you as I thought they could. But I seemed to notice even adults in the crowd trying to shout you down. So it wasn't just students, was it? It was also liberal adults who wanted to shut you down.
Oh, that's right. What we're seeing now is the left. They've tried really 2 strategies with me since we crushed them in an election and we're crushing them with our policies. First of all, they sue me all the time. I think I've got 20-something lawsuits against me now. The left is just constantly trying to sue to stop everything that I'm doing. But number 2, what they do is they've been sending in professional protesters. We found instances of them coming in from out of state to come in and try to disrupt any of my events that we're having across the state. So, there were absolutely adults that were helping organize it and were helping doing a lot of the shouting. So, yes, sir, it was absolutely part of it.
One of the things I noticed is that they know that they can't really compete within the arena of ideas, so they don't really show up prepared to support their ideas. It's to shout you down because they know that they sound ridiculous, saying that there's 600 different genders and that men can have babies and men can nurse babies. And I think even they know how stupid that sounds. So they come in with the idea of, we don't really have anything to say. We just want to keep you from saying anything. And when I looked at that video, that's kind of the impression I had, is their sole purpose was to keep you from speaking.
Yes, sir. Mark, and you mentioned the media. We have had media that are just, they are absolutely arms of the left. They're arms of the Democrat Party. So, they tried to come in and cover the event of, Ryan had to cut his speech early, and they were all shouting them down. It was like, no, actually, we stayed for the entire planned event. Yep, they did shout us down a lot. I came and met with the students beforehand, met with them for the entirety of the event, answered questions afterwards. So the liberal media is absolutely trying to spin kind of their own narrative from it. But to your point, I always look at this, Mark, you have an incredibly successful radio program. Think about how many successful radio and podcasts there are that are conservatives. Well, because, hey, conservatives, the positions that we hold are very principled, very logical, very common sense. We can sit there and let's have a discussion. Let's have a back and forth. Let's really fetter out these ideas. Let's do that. Oh, the left, notice how unsuccessful they have been in talk radio, and in the podcast space, because the reality is, hey, they can go for, 10 minutes, 15 minutes with no one questioning them, no other opposition. But boy, you put them into an hour or two format where, they take calls from listeners. It really breaks down very quickly when you're trying to explain why there's 84 genders and how that works. I mean, it just doesn't work.
They can't seem to make up their mind on how many genders there are. I've seen one girl on YouTube who was screaming that there was over 600 genders. And if you denied that, you were denying science, because apparently they control what is information versus disinformation, and they also control what is truly science. Now, if you could contrast the behavior of the liberals who were there with the Turning Point USA kids who showed up because they wanted to listen. Contrast that. I mean, was it a night and day difference, I assume?
It was unbelievable. And again, this is why, listen, we are at a war for the soul of our country, and we have the most radical leftist country's ever seen out there, propping up the Biden administration and trying to get him 4 more years in the White House. Well, on the other side, though, I am very inspired by the conservatives on the college campuses who sat there very politely or making asks of the audience, going, guys, can we just keep it down a little bit and we can ask questions. And then when their time came, they tried to engage with me very directly, very good questions about how you make successful policy. How do you win elections? What does that look like from a strategic point of view? How do you engage in meaningful debate? I mean, these are the type of questions they're asking and really wanting to go in depth into, hey, how do we make sure that that we develop policy in an effective way, things like this. Well, the other side just chanting expletives and shouting this down. It was really quite a contrast. And again, I will say, as I met with some of those young people before, I had a private meeting with a lot of the Turning Point USA folks. And we had a great conversation around, hey, they're standing up every day. They understand that their point of view might get them worse grades because their professors are so left-wing. They know that every day that they say something or make their positions known, they could be canceled. They know that the society is just waiting for them to do something that they consider non-PC and come after them. And they are bold, courageous. They understand that the country is at a tipping point. And so I couldn't have been more impressed with the Turning Point USA college students. So, I mean, that's where the reality is you have the absolutely appalling behavior from the radical leftist, and it tells you kind of how important this next election is. But also, on the other hand, you see that there are these true conservatives out there that understand the country, understand what makes America great, and are actively out fighting for it. So that's encouraging on the other hand.
Absolutely, especially among young people that age, to actually see that the liberals haven't totally won. I mean, right now, I think you could corner any of those people that were shouting you down and try to force them to explain why they don't like Jews. Whenever October 7th happened, I heard these people, and not a single one of them gave a darn about the innocent women and children who were being slaughtered in Israel. All they cared about is that there was going to be an aggressive response from Israel, in Gaza because of what had happened. All they were concerned about was how intense is the response going to be. They didn't give a darn about the people in Israel who had died. And you just want to grab one of them and say, what did these Israelis ever do to you? They're our strongest ally in the area. Why are you so against the Jews? And I'll guarantee you they could not give you an answer. And I know liberals who go to church every single weekend, including the Catholic Church, and I'll ask them, isn't your church against abortion? Well, yeah. Well, you're supporting a party that's for abortion. How do you justify that? And they either get mad or can't give you an answer, or they say, oh, well, I could never get an abortion or have my girlfriend get an abortion, but I think other people should be free to do so. But they don't really have good answers, and they start looking silly in a very short period of time. So they don't like debate. They don't like open conversation, which you were there to have. They just want to scream, and at the end of the day, whoever screams the loudest wins, in their opinion. Now, I want to get into Title IX, but we need to take a quick break first, and then we will be right back and do that. we are back with Mr. Ryan Walters, who is let me make sure I get this right. Your current title is you are the Oklahoma State Superintendent. Ryan was just telling us about an event in Stillwater, Oklahoma with Turning Point USA, where the liberal mob attempted to shout him down because they really don't want to hear anything that might oppose their ideas. Ryan, let's talk about Title IX. I think I have an idea as to what some of your opinions on that might be, but give us a summary.
Well, you see here how radical and sick wokeism is. Joe Biden is so dedicated to the destruction of the family and the traditional values of America that they are going to use Title IX. So they're going to rewrite it with the Federal Department of Education rule, which, by the way, this is also another great example of why the Federal Department of Education should not exist. Ronald Reagan said it should not exist. President Trump said it should not exist. I know President Trump is dedicated to abolishing it in his second term, but boy, this department just could not be more the antithesis of what education is. But the Department of Education decided they would rewrite the Title IX rules under Joe Biden's direction and say that now boys are girls, and if boys want to go in the girls' bathroom because they decide that they're a girl that day, you have to let them, as states do, and you have to allow boys that say they're girls into girls' sports, or they can now put in all of your federal funds in jeopardy. And so what we've already spoken out and said we're not doing it no matter what, and we are going to be filing a lawsuit against the Biden administration. We've already sent them multiple indications of that, and we've been working with other states as well to join up and fight back against them. But just so your audience knows, there's probably not a more repudiated position right now in America than, because there's two genders. Boys shouldn't be participating in girls' sports. Boys shouldn't be in the girls' bathrooms. We've seen a couple of dozen states pass very direct laws on this. But the Biden administration could care less, because you know what? They believe our country has to be remade. They believe the family has to be remade. They think that even the definitions of gender has to be remade. And so they're full steam ahead and are threatening the states right now that if you don't comply, we will absolutely jerk back your federal funds and potentially come after you for a civil rights violation.
I think I read somewhere where it comes to people who have gender dysphoria, it's about 1.6 million people in America. And I frankly think that number is greatly inflated. But even if we accept the number that they give us, that's less than 0.5% of the people in America. So I have to wonder why the left would suddenly care so much about giving these extended rights to people who have gender dysphoria. And I think the answer is they don't care about people with gender dysphoria. It's a tiny percentage of our population. What they're doing, I think if you take the 30,000 foot view from above, is this is all about destroying the family unit, which is one of the goals of Marxism. This is about destroying the individual. You have, from an individual standpoint, you're nothing more than another member of the group. You're nothing more than another member of the collective. So it's just like with illegal immigration. And, this is a touchy subject in Texas, as you might imagine. They don't care about the immigrants coming over. They don't care at all. They just view them as potential future Democrat voters. So I think there's some sort of ulterior motive in all of this, and none of it, they're not doing drag queen story hour and kindergarten drag queen stuff because they want kindergartners not to fear drag queens, or they want kindergartners not to grow up feeling awkward around drag queens. They're not doing that for that reason. That's a recruitment operation. Obviously, trannies can't have babies, so they're trying to recruit the kids at the kindergarten level when they know they're vulnerable and they know they're very impressionable. So my thought is, what are they really trying to get at with Title IX? Is it really that there are just so many boys out there wanting to compete against girls, or is there something bigger at stake?
Yes, I completely agree with you. And I always tell people this, it's not a coincidence that every policy of the Biden administration happens to break down the family. I mean, there's some that want to do this, like, it just happens to end up where we undermine what boys are, girls are, we undermine marriage, we undermine a family. No, it's all intentional. And I see really two motives. There's one, is there are some cynical Democrat operatives that are simply trying to appeal to the far left radical base. If you look at the donors of the Democrat Party, they are the most radical elements of the party. I mean, these are California liberals. These are the furthest left from the coast that are going, no, move forward, further. We got to get further to a Marxist dumpster fire. And number two, I couldn't agree with you more. It is absolutely meant to destroy the traditional values of the country, destroy the family, to create this Marxist dumpster fire of a country. And so it is absolutely like, they could care less about the individual. Here in our state, they lied about a transgender student that committed suicide. They blamed it on me. I've had millions of dollars spent against me in the state and ads from 350 LGBTQ plus groups saying that I got this student killed. Well, turns out the student committed suicide and there wasn't this fight that killed the student. They completely lied about it. They completely lied about the student's death to try to draw this attack. Why? Well, again, they don't care about the student and the family. They could care less. It is about furthering a Marxist agenda. And so everything else they could care less about.
I agree with you 100%. I think when you look at the faces of these radicals who are trying to shout you down, I mean, you have to feel like the inmates are in charge of the asylum. I mean, I think there's been a study that came out that said among the kids that have the what do they call it, gender affirming surgery, there is a high level of mental illness. There's a high level of depression. There's a tremendous amount of low self-esteem, and I think that's contributing to a lot of this. I think when I was in college, I remember one of my professors said, on any given day, any one of you could become a Hare Krishna or any of these other groups that are out there. And what they would do is they would start hanging out on college campuses around exam time because at exam time, if you've been making F's all semester, your final grade isn't going to save you. It's too late. And you've got all these kids that are hanging around in bars, depressed, trying to figure out how they're going to tell their parents that they flunked out of school, yada, yada, yada. And then they go after those kids because they are very vulnerable. And that's kind of what I see in these people. I see a bunch of kids who, for one reason or another, they didn't fit in. They had low self-esteem. And then here comes somebody throwing them a lifeline of, oh, hey, you can be one of the cool kids. I mean, there's nothing cooler than being transgender or LGBTQIA MOUSE or whatever it is they're doing, and they go for it. But let's talk about what it's like to be a female right now. I'm thinking of Riley Gaines, and you've trained all your life to try to be the best, and then you're knocked out by some guy who identifies as a girl. I mean, what does that do to the female psyche that, we can't compete anymore because there are all these boys who are competing against us and we can't possibly win? I mean, what is that doing to them? Does anybody care about them?
That's a great question. And again, you want to talk about undermining trust and society and one another and our young girls. When we outlawed boys coming into girls' sports here in the state of Oklahoma, when we did, I brought my daughter to the signing ceremony, and she's a tennis player. She's very young. She's 9, but talking to her, it's amazing. You can talk to a kid and they understand this. Well, if we play with the boys, I mean, that's a whole other story, right? The boys are gonna be able to win. They're bigger, they're stronger. That doesn't make sense. And it's amazing. It's like, I can talk to my 9-year-old, and she's like, well, yeah, I mean, that, I can't beat them at tennis. I can beat them at, I can beat the other girls. And it's just like, and I try to explain to people, think about a girl as young as my daughter, trained her whole life, getting to the state tennis tournament. She's worked so hard for this moment, and boom, she steers across the net in the finals, and it's a guy. And it's a guy that's going to go beat her, and you're going to go, guys, you can't bring that back. And for so many of the female athletes, there's no going back in time and fixing that moment, right? So it is so essential we get this radical gender theory out of our schools and we take a stand firm against these radical Marxists and say, guys, we are not going to sacrifice our girls at the altar of wokeism. We're not going to do it. So you can stop all this nonsense. We're going to protect boys. We're going to protect girls. We're going to make sure that we have no ability for girls to have their future undermined, their hard work undermined. And so I think it's just essential of, how can you look a young girl in the face and go, I'm sorry, he decided he was a girl today, and so you're just going to have to take one for the team collectively and go get whooped in this sporting event. I mean, I don't even know how people can look themselves in the face and think that's a actual position that they can hold.
I agree with you. I have no idea how they feel that way either. And it's interesting because the left, whenever you talk to them, it's all about feelings. Oh, you've got to use the right pronouns or you're going to offend these people. You've got to believe in global warming. They have a long list of things we have to do to keep from offending them. Does anyone care about offending the little girls, or in cases like Riley Gaines, the older girls? What about those people? What about their feelings? Go ahead.
No, and like you said earlier, Mark, I think it was a great example of, on a college campus, they think that this shows you critical race theory, wokeism, how corrupting it is, as there's no logic to it in the insane positions they hold. They have convinced kids that people are either oppressed or oppressors, and the Jews are the oppressors. Israel are the oppressors. And you go, guys, if you want to do a little basic overview of history, look how the Jews have been treated throughout history. But you know what? In their mindset, they have the people group set up in a certain way. Facts don't matter. It's pure emotion and who helps us in our Marxist agenda. So guess what? Israel and Jews are evil oppressors. So that is what they teach the young people. That's what they push on them. So that's what, hey, if you're a female girl, but you're a female that doesn't think you should be able to compete against males who say they're female, well, guess what? You're no longer in the oppressed group. You are now the oppressor. I mean, it's just unbelievable, the mental gymnastics there that they use to push that agenda.
Oh, I think it's a victim mentality that they have. I think it's interesting. My wife and I were in an airport, I want to say in Las Vegas, and we sat down and the plane was late, so inevitably the person next to us started talking, and so she asked my wife, where are you from? And my wife said, we're from Texas. And she said, oh my gosh, Texas. I've never been there, but I certainly wouldn't want to go there. And I said, well, would you mind telling us where you're from so I can insult your state? And Oregon. She was from Oregon.
Right.
And I said, so what? You've never been to Texas, but you never want to go there because of what you saw on the evening news. What's your reason for not wanting to go to Texas? And she actually told me that I wasn't a very nice person and that I wasn't a very forgiving person because I was holding her accountable for what she had said about Texas. And I said, oh, I get it. You're the victim here. You reach out to my wife and start insulting the state where we live, and I call you out on it, and all of a sudden you're the victim because I'm not forgiving enough. And to me, I will always remember that example of just how nutty these people are. Their big thing is finding victims and separating, as you said. They want to throw everybody into the victim group or the oppressor group. If you're white, you're an oppressor. If you're a Jew, you're an oppressor. And what's interesting is that it's not just anti-Zionism, it's anti-Semitism, because if you're a Jew in the United States right now on a college campus, you're a target. You may never have been to Israel in your life, okay? You may never have said, let's go bomb Gaza in retaliation. But if you are merely a Jew in the United States, and they're not even going to ask you your opinion of what happened on October 7th, they are going to come after you. So this isn't about, they say, well, we're going after the oppressors. That's a lie. They're going after anyone who is Jewish. And we're seeing that on the college campuses where kids are being told, if you're Jewish, you might want to go away for a while. This isn't it's not a good time for you to be here right now. So I get frustrated by it, but I said at some point in the show, I said, I feel like the inmates are running the asylum, And Ryan, I really do feel that way. It's absolutely nuts. If you can look someone in the eye and say men can get pregnant, men can have periods, men can nurse babies, and you don't pay attention to how many gay couples have molested the children they've adopted. I mean, how many times you see two males who are married adopt a male kid, and before you know it, the authorities are coming in because they're raping the kid. It's just, this is not natural. It goes against everything that God ever taught us, and we shouldn't be doing it. So my question is, what do you see for the future of Ryan Walters? How do you continue this fight on behalf of the people of Oklahoma?
Well, what we're going to continue to do is get wokeism out of the schools. We're going to drive the teachers' unions out of the schools, and we're going to put parents back in charge. That's why we've passed things like a Parents' Bill of Rights. That's why we've continued to do things to hold schools accountable that are F schools. With our accountability measures, we've taken 117 schools off the F list this year. We previously had only 30 that had come off of it, a record before. We tripled that. Well, that's what happens when you take wokeism out, you drive out CRT, gender theory, and you replace it with math, reading, science, history. And guess what else we've done, Mark? We put incentives in there that are free market related. Guess what? If you do a great job as a teacher, we give you bonuses. If you are one of the best teachers in the state, we pay you more money. We have a merit-based pay system where teachers can make up to $100,000 and stay in the classroom. So these are things, when we pay tutors, we pay them based on performance. If you come in as a tutor and you get a kid caught back up, we give you triple the amount. So, the free market works. You've heard for so long, the left fight, any kind of competitive type of initiative. They fight any free market principle in education. It works. The conservatives are right. If you bring parents into the schools, you protect parents' rights, you have full school choice, you create a competitive environment, you use merit pay, all of a sudden the results come. And we're dedicated to doing that. We're also dedicated to getting Joe Biden and the federal government out of our classrooms. The feds continue to try to bully and intimidate states. They are the birthplace of DEI, Common Core, transgender theory. They are the ones that are pushing this on the schools, working with the teachers' unions. We have to continue to fight back against the feds and get Joe Biden out of the White House, frankly, and get President Trump back in there so we can get this country going the right track.
Well, I tell you, in Oklahoma, I feel like they've got the right guy in charge. I wish you the best of luck in your continued fight. Anytime you want to come back and join us on the Tea Party Power Hour, Ryan, I'd be thrilled to have you as a guest. We need good people like you out there fighting the fight. So keep up the good work, and I wish you continued success in Oklahoma.
Mark, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for your voice, for your fight for conservative values. You've done a tremendous job in Texas, and so I was honored to be on the show and appreciate the opportunity very much.
Fantastic. Have a great day, Ryan. Talk to you soon.
You too. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Gillar.